Hello everyone and welcome to Parker's Auto Archives. Manor Park Classics in Cheshire have their next classic car auction this Saturday. For my first ever YouTube video, I've decided to go through their entire lineup and pick out my top 10 watches for the auction. The auction starts at 10 o'clock on the morning of Saturday the 14th of September. The buyer's premium is 15% on top of the hammer price, so please bear this in mind when looking at estimates. As I go through my list from 10 to 1, I'll share a bit of information about each car, discuss what makes them special, and why I think they deserve a place in any collector's garage. Obviously all the opinions are my own, and this is not any form of investment advice. So without any further ado, let's jump in with number 10. First up, we've got this lovely 1994 Lotus Esprit S4. I think due to the popularity of the more contemporary models like the Elise, Exige, etc., the Esprit is hiding under the radar and they are not yet to get any momentum in terms of value. This one has a fresh MOT, good history and respectable mileage of just over 60,000. The main reason I've picked this for my top 10 is the condition that the car seems to be in. Considering it's now 30 years old, the paintwork looks absolutely unbelievable. The interior also looks fantastic, with perhaps just a tiny bit of work needed to the driver's seat bolster, but to be honest that's just being picky and it's something that will easily rectify. In terms of performance, the S4 had the same power output from the previous generation SE, kicking out 264 brake horsepower from its 2.2 litre 4-cylinder turbo engine, giving a 0-60 time of a very respectable 4.7 seconds and a top speed of 160 miles an hour. This car gives you the perfect blend of future classic status, great performance, and with an estimate of 20 to 24 grand, it's also unbelievable value for money. Other than perhaps a TVR, I can't really think of anything you can get for this kind of money with this level of performance, as well as the supercar looks. Drop a comment below if you can think of anything. Next in at number 9 is this 1998 BMW Z3M Roadster. Now these cars do divide opinions, and I think this is probably reflected in the values. However, here's the facts. They have the inline 6-cylinder S50 engine from the E46 M3 Evo, pushing 320 brake horsepower through a 5-speed ZF manual gearbox and limited slip diff and into the back wheels. 0 to 60 is over in around 5.3 seconds, and it pushes onto a top speed of 155, which I assume is to be limited. In terms of fast, analog driving experience with a soft top, these have to be up there with the best available. Maybe it's the looks that split opinions, but I definitely think they're starting to age very well. With an estimate of 11 to 13 grand, this example seems to offer really good value. It's had 3 former keepers, there's just over 60,000 on the clock, and there's an impressive service history. It's also completely standard, which is quite nice. Just like the Lotus, looking at the pictures I can barely see a mark on the exterior. The interior spec won't be to everyone's cup of tea, but I think the red gives it more of a lift compared to the plain black interiors that you usually see. It's also had some recent work carried out, with a new clutch and master and slave cylinder fitted, and the MOT lasts through to February next year. I'd be really shocked if this doesn't creep past the higher estimate number. Now on to number 8, and these really don't need much of an introduction. Super stereotypical for a classic car auction, but why is it on my list? Simply because it's one of the only minis from this period that I've seen that isn't either modified, showing signs of rot, or both. It's got a fresh MOT, service history and maintenance log backing up its 86,000 miles. With an estimate of 6.5 to 7.5 grand, this is great value for such an honest car. In 1.3 Cooper spec, it's got the Monaco interior, British racing green exterior with white detailing and the all-important fog lights. Just like the previous 2 cars, these do seem to be at the bottom of their value curves and can surely only go one way. Whereas the previous 2 cars may split opinions, as long as there's night and day, there will always be a huge following for these. Less can be said though about my next pick. I don't think I've ever been to or browsed any car auction and not seen either a first or second generation CLK going through. And when you delve into these ever-present prospects, they're always unloved, overused, or just generally lacking in any appeal, to be honest. They either don't sell, or they end up going for the equivalent price of a Greggs 4-pack of sausage rolls. This one, however, is a completely different story. For starters, it's a 500, not your usual 200, 230 or 280. That means it's a full fat 5 litre V8. Secondly, the mileage. This car has only covered 26,000 miles, which to be honest is quite unbelievable. Thirdly, being the elegant spec, this car is fully loaded. And finally, just look at the condition. Looking at Auto Trader currently, there's only 5 CLK 500s for sale with less than 80,000 miles. The cheapest is $5,500, which is just to say under the estimate of $6 or $7,000 for Manor Park's car. The most expensive car on Auto Trader has the same mileage and possibly a slightly more attractive specification, but just look at the price of it. Now, are you ready for some max power nostalgia? Clearly, due to 99% of these being written off in McDonald's car parks around the country in the early 2000s, you barely ever see them anymore. I can't actually remember the last time that I saw one of these without a big bore exhaust and 6 benign speakers poking through the parcel shelf. Welcome everyone to the legend that is a Citroen Saxo VTR. This is a Mark II model from 2003, which I believe is the year they stopped making them, so it's a very late model. Now, although these had quite an underwhelming, wait for it, 98 brake horsepower, they weighed just over 900 kilograms. Performance wasn't neck-breaking, with 0 to 60 coming in at just over 9 seconds, but I do remember them feeling much faster because of the curb weight, especially flying around a corner with a handbrake pulled whilst trying to keep hold of a Big Mac. Good times. The VTS was obviously the spec to have, with a 16-valve version of the same engine, but the VTRs were much cheaper to insure, which was the important thing to the type of people buying them. I always felt like these were on a par with the likes of Fiestas, Corsas, and obviously the 106, which it shared the same platform with. But where the other manufacturers pressed on with their next models, Citroen really dropped the ball when it came to the terrible successor, the C2. Despite these keeping the same VTR and VTS badges, they just never lived up to the reputation of the Saxo. Anyway, back to this particular car. An incredibly low 59,000 miles, one owner from new, pristine condition. This is an absolute sure sale in the auction. There cannot be many like this around anymore. Just look at the interior. It looks like it's never been sat in. And now for the best bit. This car does not have a reserve. No catch. There's service history. There's a fresh MOT booked in for the sale. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. I genuinely believe that whatever someone pays for this, if they keep it wrapped in cotton wool, they will never lose money on it. Of the two currently for sale nationally on Auto Trader, one is a stereotypically modified version with a surprisingly low mileage actually. The other is standard, but it's a 7-owner car with nearly 110k on the clock. If this is worth $5,000, I'm genuinely not sure what the Manor Park car will go for. Whilst we're talking about investments, check out this next pick. Now, I know I'm going completely against the grain here of every review I've ever read and every video I've ever watched about the 2.5 986 Porsche Boxster. Yes, it's underpowered. Yes, it lies in the shadows of the 2.7 and the 3.2S. And yes, they had engine issues, left, right and centre. But here we have a 1999 2.5 in glorious Guards Red with no reserve. In the same auction, there's a 3.2S and also two 2.7 versions of the 986, all with very reasonable estimates. I just know that this car will end up getting overlooked, and I've got a feeling someone is going to get a bargain here, and that's why it fits in at my number 5. For someone who just wants to enjoy the dynamics of analog driving in a car that was made for such a thing, here are the key facts about this car. It's got a relatively low mileage of 83,000. The service history is substantial, although there's no mention of the common issues being resolved, such as the IMS bearings, etc. It's got 23 service stamps in the book, including 5 long life services, which is really impressive. It's a manual, linked to Porsche's flat 6 engine. It had a lot of option boxes ticked when new, which again, I think this will get overlooked with it just being a 2.5. And finally, these have to be at the bottom of their value curves now, if not already starting to climb the journey back up the other side. They cannot continue to be this cheap. Out of all my 10 picks, I think this has the potential to be the biggest bargain and will certainly offer the best miles per miles value. Just like the CLK featured earlier, the E46 M3s are always commonplace in classic car auctions. I and ahed about putting this car as high as 4th, however every time I opened the pictures up it just grew on us more and more. Firstly, there's the condition of the interior. This car looks like it's barely been sat in. Even with a relatively low mileage of 66,000, in comparison to other E46 M3s you see, this seems to be in amazing condition. You'll also notice just how highly specified this car is. The full sat-nav treatment, along with upgraded Harman Kardon sound system, CSL 19-inch wheels, electric seats, xenon lights, and the factory hardtop. The other reason it features so highly on the list is the fact that it's a rare manual. This, coupled with BMW's screaming S54 engine kicking out over 340 brake horsepower, gives me an awful lot of want for this car. Now we move into the all-important top 3, where things get really interesting and probably a bit obscure. In fact, I think the world has gone completely mad with this next one. A 2004 Aston Martin Vanquish S. Now, I'm talking about a 200 miles an hour V12 monster with an estimate of less than 40 grand. It's got a naturally aspirated 6-litre engine pumping out 520 horses and a soundtrack that will absolutely embarrass anything else mass produced for the road. Now it does have high mileage for a Vanquish S, currently sitting at 80,000, but it has great service history to back it up, as well as a fresh MOT with no advisories. It's a 5-owner car, so it looks as though each owner has used it quite a bit, which I always think is a good sign of its past reliability. These are a much more bespoke car compared to the more contemporary models such as the Vantage and DB cars, with only around 1,000 being built in the S format. In fact, the Vanquish S was around 70 grand more expensive when it was new compared to the DB9. The S was quite a step up from the normal Vanquish, with an extra 60 brake horsepower and changes to the steering, gear shifts and suspension, as well as bigger Brembo brakes and more sporting aero package. This all equates to much stronger values compared to the normal Vanquish. Now, that brings me on to this car's estimate, which sits between 34 and 38 grand. If this car had half the mileage on it, you would be looking at upwards of at least 50 grand. But I think because it's got 20 service stamps in its book, all from either Aston dealers or specialists, I don't actually think mileage is actually a problem. In fact, I think you could use this car properly, putting around 5 to 10,000 miles on a year, keep the specialist service history going, and you're not going to lose any value on it. If it was a garage queen sitting on 10 to 20,000 miles, you wouldn't want to use it without the fear of the value dropping. So I think this actually presents a very unique opportunity. The description also mentions that it needs a bit of cosmetic cleanup, and you can see on the interior pictures, but again, that just adds to my point that it's a car that's been used and can continue to be used. Also bear in mind by the time options were stuck on in the factory, you wouldn't get much change out of 200 grand when these were new. A quick check on what is for sale on Auto Trader, and yes, the estimate for this car sits well below the cheapest available on Auto Trader currently. I'm actually surprised at how many Vanquish S's there are available at the moment, to be honest. And you can see the garage queens at the bottom of the page here, demanding top end figures. In terms of maintenance and running costs, yes, they will cost more than, say, a DB9, probably due to the fact that it's got less common parts that weren't shared with other platforms. But I would suggest that servicing these is probably cheaper than, say, a Ferrari of the same period. Now, if you think these are rare, get a load of this next classic beauty. According to the website, how many left? This is one of 8 in existence in the UK. Here we have a W124 300e 4MATIC. Being a 1989 car, this comes from the era where Mercedes pretty much had the quality market sewn up. The W124 is basically the old numbering format for what we would now class as an E-Class. It's a 3 litre, straight 6 with an automatic box, kicking out around about 180 brake horsepower. Now, forgetting about the rarity factor of the 4-wheel drive element for a second, check out the condition of this interior. I reckon this is one of the tidiest W124s I've ever seen. There's some missing service history from the 1990s, but there's confirmation from Mercedes that it's had regular services in the 2000s, and this is backed up by other printouts supplied with the car. Sitting on 56,000 miles, it's only done 5,000 miles in the last 15 years, and the MOT history backs this up, as well as the condition that the car is in. I cannot believe this car has no reserve. I'd be very surprised if there isn't a lot of Mercedes enthusiasts watching this one, as there can't be many left in this condition. Moving on from the rarest of cars and onto the very common car that makes up my number 1 slot. So common, in fact, you're going to think I'm mental for putting this at number 1, but there's a few very good reasons for it, which I'll now explain. Right, I know what you're thinking. Does it get any more common than a 996 Carrera? Well, probably not, but this is where there's method in my madness. You see, for the same reason I chose a 2.5 Boxster, there's a new way of looking at the plain old Carrera. For starters, they've definitely hit rock bottom price wise. In fact, I think they've actually jumped up a bit recently, and that shows with the estimate being between 12 and 14 grand, which is only just slightly less than some of the 997s going through the same auction. So, if ever there's a time to jump on the 996 bandwagon, it has to be now. Secondly, I think there's a nostalgic intrigue with a basic 996, just like the 2.5 986 Boxster. Everyone buys a Carrera S or the Turbo, etc., which, okay, are better cars, but I think there's an apparent renaissance for all things basic. When I say basic, we're still talking about a throaty 3.4 litre flat 6 engine knocking out just under 300 brake horsepower. Okay, not a lot by today's standards, but still enough to get the car from 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds. The car is a nicely specified Guards red on grey leather interior, a very uncommon combination which will clearly help this car when it comes to future values. I would say the vast majority of these are silver on black leather. The GT3 wheels also go a long way in making this car look extra appealing, although they could do with a bit of a refurb. But my favourite part of the specification is the fact that it's a manual. 86,000 miles I would say is pretty average for a 996 of this ilk, along with the general condition inside and out. But the thing that sets this car apart for me is its maintenance history. This car has had, wait for it, over 50 grand spent on it by its current owner of 14 years. That includes things like an engine rebuild as recent as 2013 and another overhaul in 2023 by a Porsche specialist. IMS bearing issue sorted, mate. All of this leaves its new owner the simple task of bringing the paintwork and interior up to grade A standards, and then you have the perfect 996 Carrera. Hopefully I haven't caused too much controversy with the top 10 that I've chosen. I could already sense a bit of backlash about the number one spot, but it's just personal taste at the end of the day. Please check out Manor Park's page for this auction, as there's some unbelievable classics going through. I've put a link down in the description. I'd also love to know in the comments if there's anything you would swap for my list and why. Finally, as this is my first ever YouTube video, I would really appreciate it if you could leave any constructive feedback on maybe how I can improve the content or the delivery of it. Really hope you've enjoyed what I've put together, and look forward to seeing you all in my next video. Thanks for watching.